Hey y'all, it's Steffi and welcome back to my channel. So I had mentioned in my being a manager in public accounting video something about horror stories, and y'all definitely let me know in the comments that you wanted to hear them. Today I am going to be sharing with you guys one of my horror stories. It's a story time about my experience with toxic work cultures, toxic people at work, give more transparency on the fact that these types of situations exist in corporate America or in the workplace. That way you're not blindsided by it, and also so that you can, actively work on creating an environment that you would be happy to be at. My experience in dealing with that, as well as my, opinion and views on how power and opportunity disparity exists in the workplace that can lead to wage gap. Before I jump into this topic, I need to give y'all a disclaimer. It might be a little bit long, so if you feel like jumping ahead, then go here, but don't come for me if you don't stick around to listen to the disclaimer and pop off on me in the comments or anything like that, because I'm trying to give y'all a disclaimer to avoid, people getting their feelings hurt or feeling some kind of way about what I talk about. These are experiences and observations that I've personally made being in public accounting and just being in the workforce in general. I don't think what I'm about to talk about is only existing in public accounting or the accounting profession itself. Very pervasive and insidious in many different professions and groups of people. So I'm not saying that this is going to happen to you. Sharing what I went through, more so to first of all be transparent about that, what that means, what that may look like. Secondly, if you're going through something similar, I want you to know that you're not alone. If you don't realize it's happening to others, you think you did something to deserve it. At least some people may think that. I know I have felt that at times, and I want you guys to know that it actually is a much more pervasive issue, and you're not alone. You don't deserve it, and you know what? You are going to be a diamond after this, because y'all know what I'm going to say. Pressure creates diamonds, and tough situations just strengthen your character. So these are the points in your life where you're going to be growing through something, so just grow through what you go through, y'all. I'm sure I'll be sharing more of my tired sayings here throughout the video. I'm not generalizing this to the firm that I was at or to even the office itself, because there are many different departments. I'm not saying this happens on every team. There's always some rotten apples, so I wanted to share that. These are more my experiences with specific rotten apples. I haven't been in that situation in almost, in a few years. So things could have changed, and I really hope they have. Every location and office, no matter what company you're at, each of them have their own culture. The driving force is really the tone at the top. It's your leadership group. It's the people who are in power, the people that people look up to. So I think it's so important to set a good example, and I think it's important to do that starting day one from when you walk into an office. You don't have to have a title to set a good example or to be a leader, because there are lots of people who have big titles who are definitely not leaders. It's important to share stories and the lessons that I've learned from those experiences. The last thing I'd like to say is, just because you have not personally experienced something does not mean that it's not happening for someone else. And I'll talk more about that in the story, as we go along. But I bring that up because in my manager video, I did share that, there is a wage disparity that exists in the workplace. And majority of the time, in my opinion, and from what I've observed, it happens between genders, so men and women, and then it also can happen with minority individuals. I personally feel like I saw that where I was at and with the groups of people that I was around. Definitely exists, and I got, I didn't do a little disclaimer in that video because it was literally like, I don't know, 10 words, so I didn't feel like I needed to do that, and I had done an original disclaimer anyways. But I think a few people took it as me saying that happens everywhere, and whenever I share my opinions, I'm not generalizing it and saying this happens everywhere and to every single person, but it definitely does exist, and to say that it doesn't is speaking from a very privileged perspective, and I stand by that. But that's also why I want to share my disclaimer now that, you know, this was my experience. You may not experience the same thing. You may have worked where I worked at and you may not experience it either, and I hope that's the case, because, you know, overall I really enjoyed where I have worked at, and I probably would have been there still had this situation not happened. But everything happens for a reason. I truly believe that, and without that situation happening, I wouldn't be where I am today. Please keep an open mind. I hope, you know, if you're part of my subby fam, this community, we're here to support each other and to learn from each other and to have empathy for one another. I'm hoping to share this story so that you can help to create a positive culture in whatever field you're in. I think that's so important, and you know, sometimes it takes new blood to bring in a fresh perspective, a new kind of outlook. Also one of the goals of me sharing my story. So okay, anyways, let's jump right into it. I think public accounting is a great place to learn. I have a video about why I went back into public accounting, which I'll link in the cards for you guys if you want to hear about that. Starting fresh with a new company, I really try to just keep my head down. I want to learn as much as I can, learn the methodology, you know, how things are done at this particular company. I want to prove myself. I want to prove that I'm a valuable resource. And so I try to just focus more on that. I don't really care too much about the social aspect of it. I'm not trying to make that sound bad. I mean, like, you know, it's not as important to me to go to, you know, all the happy hours. You know, I'm more focused on work because that's why I'm there. I have a life outside of work. I'd like to get to it. So I try to do my work. You're a new person. You don't really know what the culture is truly like until you get somewhere. A couple of years, kind of like blinders on. Didn't really know people at first. So I was assigned on engagements. I was on an engagement with, you know, a senior manager who at the time was a really great mentor for me and definitely helped provide me with opportunities, and I enjoyed working with that senior manager a lot. Not every team that you go on to, especially when you're new and you don't know like the dynamic, the team culture, you know, you may not mesh with them, and I think that's part of being a professional, is learning to work with anyone. Whether they're your friends or if they're a little bit more difficult to work with, but still being able to maintain like a professional demeanor and, you know, still have output, get the work done. And, you know, I think part of retaining people, especially in public accounting, is once you have like a good team dynamic, is like continuing to keep that team dynamic together. You know, it's better when people work seamlessly together. There's no like competitiveness necessarily between people. You're working as a team and it's not like one person against another person. Most of the engagements that I worked on, that's what it was like. It was very collaborative. Be very careful about who you spend your time with. You know, work, sometimes you can't choose who you are around because you're assigned to a certain engagement, but like your free time and the time that you can actually consciously control, like be very selective about that, because, you know, time is very precious. And I think sometimes people go into work thinking that they need to be on a team where, you know, people, they're just gonna be friends with people, and that's always nice. Trust me, I completely understand wanting that feeling because I have that now, but you know, it's not the most important thing. I think what's important, especially when you're at work, is obviously to enjoy the people you're working with, to have like a good team dynamic. I'd been at the firm for a little bit, and then I started hearing from, you know, people, this like cliquey group talked well of by certain people in leadership. Their names always came up. They got to do trainings and, you know, all different types of things. They were just given opportunities that maybe other people weren't given for whatever reason. I would hear it, but because I wasn't experiencing it, consciously make the decision to create an environment that is inclusive and create an environment that you want to be in versus what maybe is already existing. So That's kind of what I focused on. And I didn't really see that side of it other than roundtables. So twice a year, seniors and above would, all get together in a room and would evaluate, first the staff, and then the seniors would leave, and then everyone would evaluate the seniors. Basically, your advisor share the feedback that you got from your different evaluations, and then people who work with you would chime in, and that would determine what your rating and whether you would get a promotion, which also affects your raise and bonus. The compensation piece of it would always be taken care of by the partner group on their own, but like the feedback to determine your rating would be done as a group. Maybe like a handful of times where I interacted with individuals in this, like, I don't even know what to call it. Y'all, this is gonna sound so juvenile and high school, and I agree with you, and that's why I kind of tried to avoid it, because I was like, I don't got time for that. I only interacted with them a handful of occasions. Once when I first started, it was like my very first day, leadership assigned certain people to take you out to lunch. It's kind of like your welcoming lunch, and that was probably one of the most uncomfortable lunches I've ever had. I don't know, it just was not very warm and welcoming. Feeling and the environment that they were creating was not one that I wanted to be a part of, which is totally fine. Like, you're not gonna get along with everyone, and that's fine. I didn't really have to deal with them too much because I was in a different industry niche and they were in something else. And so I really didn't deal with it. And so this is where I'm saying, like, just because you don't experience it, it doesn't mean that it's not happening for others. I would hear it from people that I worked with, over time, that they just had bad experiences with certain people, and it would, stem back to a certain group, or that they felt excluded and things of that nature. And, all I could do was try to create a different environment for others. So there was that, and then, like I said, during those roundtable discussions, you definitely see that if you were in with that group, they would say nice things about you. If you were not in with that group, they would find something wrong with your performance. I also feel part of being like a senior or a leader is actually developing the people around you. And if you are picking and choosing who you want to develop versus doing that for whoever is on your team, I think that is a reflection on your leadership skills too. So it's not just that person. But anyways, there was a situation where during roundtables, there was a staff who was well connected with this group. The team that he was working on had the most feedback to provide on his actual work performance, which was not at a level to be promoted to senior. Somehow or another, after roundtables, even though that was the feedback that was provided, the only positive feedback that was provided for that staff was, if the staff doesn't get promoted to senior, that's really gonna hurt the staff's confidence. No merit on their actual abilities. So from that roundtable discussion, it really seemed like the staff was not gonna get promoted to senior based on the actual feedback they received from the team, based on his actual work performance. And when promotions came out, guess what? The staff got promoted to senior. That was not the case for everyone who was in the staff pool. There were staff who got similar feedback and did not get promoted to senior. It's that type of disparity that really showed how a group of people who had power could really affect someone's, growth opportunities, which also affects their compensation. I had never actually worked with those individuals before, so I really do try to give people the benefit of the doubt based on my personal experiences with you, versus listening to gossip. Same thing with if they would talk poorly about staff or seniors and talking about how their performance was bad. I didn't necessarily rely on what they said. I would still book people. If they had availability and I needed someone on one of my engagements, I would still book that person and see where they were at. At that point, typically, those people had one foot out the door, whether voluntarily or involuntarily. During my last year of being in public accounting, I had a choice between two different public engagements, which is really nice, to manage one of the two. I ended up going with an engagement where my mentor was on, the senior manager, who I really do feel like that person helped me among others, helped me get, promoted to manager. And I got promoted to manager within a year of being at the firm. So I don't know if that also I don't know if that was jealousy on certain people's parts as well, but I felt that my performance merited that, and others felt the same way. So I chose to go with my mentor, and once I made that decision, I found out that a person from that group was going to be a senior on my job, so that person would be reporting to me. So once I found that out, I kind of had a little bit of anxiety about it, because from what I had heard and from my experience with that person's style does not go along with mine. Like I said, I wanted to give it a go and just try my best. And also, I know a lot of situations where I'm uncomfortable is where I grow, so I said, okay, I'll go for it. Also, this particular engagement, demanding client, which I was totally fine with, because personally I feel like when you sign up for a client service job, then that's your job, right? Like, you need to be available for your client, and if you choose to go on somewhere like that, then you know what you're signing up for, kind of. So anyways, but long story short, the client interaction, that was one of my favorite clients. And even though there was a lot of hard work and a lot of transactions and things of that nature, like, that did not bother me. It was stressful at times, don't get me wrong, but I still enjoyed it, and that was not even part of the reason why I left public accounting. It was not because of that at all. There was a lot that happened that year on that team, and what I think is interesting is there's definitely a hierarchy in public accounting, and as much as, people don't like that. If you don't like that, don't go into public accounting, because there's definitely a hierarchy, but it's there for a reason, to provide guidance and to make it very clear about, who's a preparer, who's a reviewer, who owns what. And if you get down, your skills, you continue to move up in your career, and that's just the game of public accounting. It is what it is, especially if you go to like a traditional accounting firm, like a mid-tier, regional, a Big Four firm. What was interesting to me was how much power someone who at a senior level had in comparison to managers, senior managers, partners. Like, how that person was able to talk to or talk down to people at those levels. It was really just a very weird dynamic, and I've just given up on trying to understand it. I just don't even care to understand it. Over the course of that year, I did get closer to that person, to the senior, and on a one-on-one basis, I definitely like that person. Everyone has their quirks and has things that they can work on, just like I do. Just because that person treated me well doesn't mean that I overlook the fact that they treated others poorly, and I don't like that. The kind of team environment this individual was trying to create was not in line with the environment that I will accept. For me, when it's work and it's team related, like, we are inclusive, we treat each other with respect, you help each other out. It's a team effort. There's not just like one person who, gets all the glory, anyone that I want to work with. And that was kind of the environment that was created, that I was actively like battling against, and it was so annoying. And you can kind of see that in my vlogs, which I'll link them here in the cards. I was constantly just stressed out and kind of in a bad mood, and again, that toxicity will bleed into like your personal life, and that's the point where I was just like, I'm done with this. I'll share a handful of things to give you guys examples of what it was I was, what I found to be toxic. The senior would report to me, I reported to the senior manager. They would be instant messaging all day long, like all day long, and you can tell that it's not like work related. It would be like, they'd start snickering, and when you're in an audit room, you can kind of tell when people are doing that stuff. Anyways, this is hard to talk about. For me, I didn't really focus more on the senior, because I felt like the senior manager, who is the leader over all of us, you know, should be the one to set the tone, should be the one to, like, that's who is empowering others to act a certain way, and is what is empowering others to see what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. So one specific situation, the senior did not have their CPA license, so they're definitely not going to be making manager anytime soon, and they were not actively trying to get their CPA. So with that being said, I later found out, actually from the senior, and so some of this, it was just creating a whole bunch of drama that is unnecessary. Once things kind of went left with me and the senior manager, I'll tell you guys the story about that soon. You know, the senior told me that the senior manager was talking poorly about me to the senior, saying that I was indecisive. I had worked with this person on, you know, 3-4 different engagements. Never was that feedback given to me, which if it had been, I would have accepted it and, you know, worked on it. That's totally fine. But to have the senior manager talk poorly about me to someone who reports to me was very hurtful. Creates that toxic, kind of hostile work environment in a way, because, you know, we all have things we can work on, but that feedback, like I've said before, should be given to that person, and it should be given to that person in a timely manner where they can try to work on it before it just ends up in an evaluation and you never told that person. So anyways, that was one of the things. Secondly, apparently the senior manager was telling that senior that, you know, that person would be the manager on this engagement, which, like I've said already, day-to-day senior perspective, sure, totally fine, but when it came to technical risks, they were not ready to be a manager and they did not have their CPA. So the fact that that senior manager was saying that to that person was really hurtful as well, because like I said, I had worked with this person on multiple engagements before, and each of those team environments were great. The only change in that team dynamic was the senior. I left because of the senior manager, which was unfortunate because, like I had said, that person had been a very big mentor for me, and I definitely appreciate, you know, what the help that they had given me throughout my career up until that shit show. Them talking about people behind people's back, which is definitely a well-known fact of that group of people that I mentioned before. On top of that, you know, talking poorly out loud in the audit room, making up nicknames, not good nicknames, which is, you know, unprofessional. And what's funny is one of the things that I would always get positive feedback on in my evaluations was how professional I was. And for me, I was like, isn't that kind of a given? Like, aren't we all professionals in public accounting? But once I started being around that one person of that group or more people of that group, I could see why. They are completely unprofessional, talking crap about people at the firm, about the client, about each other, like, you know, so that's where the toxicity was coming in. People who wanted to talk bad about each other, who judged people based on their looks. The senior was well connected. I think one of the defining moments tarnished the rapport that I had with the senior manager. So we had been working on a project and we had a staff come in. This staff had been scheduled with the intent to keep them on, you know, to have a consistent team. Staff reported to the senior, so the senior was responsible for developing them, for providing instructions and things of that nature. Even after that situation, I had brought that person onto my other engagements and I enjoyed working with her. So, but anyways, on this particular engagement, you know, the senior was responsible for the staff, so I just let that be because I've got other things to do. I noticed while I was in the room, you know, the way the senior would talk to another staff who was like a buddy of the senior was very different from how they would talk to the new staff. Tone would be just a lot less friendly. The new staff was gonna roll off. And it was our last day on the project. We had wrapped up and we were gonna go to like a team happy hour afterwards. Senior was allowed to pick, you know, where we were gonna go. And so in my mind, this is a team event. We all worked on this project, so we're all gonna go. So that day, you know, no one was saying like where we were going. We didn't have a calendar invite. I had no idea where we were gonna go. So, you know, I had asked out loud like, hey, are we still doing happy hour? The senior and the senior manager were like, shh, shh. And I was like, you know, why, why can't I say this out loud in the audit room? So everyone had, you know, started packing up and leaving. And so me and the other senior were like the last ones to pack up. And so I was like, are we still going to happy hour? We're going to this place. And then I said, well, why didn't we just talk about it out loud in the audit room? And the other senior said it was the decision of the senior and the senior manager to not include the new staff. And that's why they didn't say it out loud, so that that person wouldn't hear. Found that out. I called my senior manager, so like my boss, asking like, you know, is happy hour still on? And the senior manager said, yeah, we're going to this place. Like, didn't they tell you? And I said no. Brought up, you know, why are we not having the new staff there? And it was something like, you know, oh, I don't know if they're going to be cool with like, you know, drinking or whatever, and we just didn't want to put them in a weird situation, which I thought was bullshit. The senior manager could tell that I was not okay with that, and so the senior manager was like, you know, you don't have to go if you don't want to. And at that point I was really pissed off. So I was like, you know what, I've got a lot of things to work on. I'm just gonna go ahead, you know, and head home and you know, finish my work day there. So the senior manager was like, okay. The turning points for me in that engagement team, I had later had a conversation with the senior manager after like the next, you know, after the weekend, and had brought up how I was just not okay with that. I'm not okay with creating a team environment where we're excluding people. Like, if this is a team event and it's on the team budget, you know, everyone should be involved in it, and not excluded. And the senior manager's response was, oh, well, that person's not going to be on the team anymore, so we won't have to deal with this again. And that's not what I am. That was not acceptable to me. I started to see like, you know, the senior is in competition with me, and I don't like that. And the senior has also even told me like, you know, that they like competition, which is fine, but in my eyes, I don't believe you should compete with anyone else. There's plenty of space in an audit team and in the world for everyone. So all you should be competing with is yourself, making yourself better, and not in competition with others, is my opinion. So yeah, so that was definitely a turning point. And talking about this just makes me feel so negative. So the senior manager was having some personal life issues, and I think that kind of caused that person to act the way and be the way that they were. It was a very tense environment at a time, and we all went and had happy hour to kind of like just smooth things out amongst us, because, you know, it was unnecessary tension that really didn't need to be there. It was also partially because the senior manager putting me and the senior kind of like against each other in a way where tasks that really I should own, the senior manager would be like, can someone do this? And the senior would automatically be like, oh, I'll do it, you know? So I'd have to pull the senior aside and say, no, I'm gonna take care of it, you know, and which, granted, I'm very appreciative of that experience, because I've never been with such an alpha personality like that. So it definitely like helped me grow. So I appreciate that for sure. There was times where, you know, a communication needed to go out to the client, and, you know, I typically would take care of that. And I think the senior wanted that exposure, but like I've said in my manager video, and just to give you context, we were all new to the engagement. So we're all trying to prove ourselves, not giving away all of your opportunities. Like, I'm not trying to stunt anyone's growth at all, but, you know, otherwise, why would I be needed if I didn't take on certain tasks? So anyways, the senior one time had told me, you know, like in the middle, in front of everyone, was kind of like, you know, I was like, okay, I'm gonna send out this communication, and the senior was like, no, just send it to me, I'll do it. And it was really kind of embarrassing. I felt like I was being undercut. So anyways, I had to like collect myself, because I've never experienced that before. I had to collect myself, and then later on, you know, I pulled the senior aside and said, these are my responsibilities, I'm gonna take care of it. You know, I appreciate that you want to help, but I'm owning this. And so we had a good conversation there. And I think that to a degree, I feel like the senior was testing me to see how much they could get away with or take away from me. And you know, I'm very appreciative of that experience because it taught me to like stand up for myself. That particular situation, I'm not saying is toxic at all. It's, you know, a harder work experience to gain, and that's fine. But it was the environment of excluding people, of talking poorly about people. Felt like it wasn't a team effort anymore. It was like trying to, you know, be a shining star and make your mark and have your name be known and have your voice be heard. It was just not a good environment that I wanted to be around. Like you'll see in my vlogs, I just started, you know, telling myself, focus on the work, you know, all this other drama and bullshit, like I don't need to deal with it. Just focus on the work. And that busy season was probably one of the worst busy seasons in terms of the environment that I was in, other than my very first busy season, which y'all have heard my horror story about that. But like to the point where you don't, like, you just can feel tension in the room, like that's when it's difficult and it's like not worth it, you know. So I had confronted the senior manager about what the senior had told me. So, you know, me and the seniors had gotten together and had happy hour to kind of like smooth things out before busy season, just to say, you know, just to figure out like how do we work well together, you know. And that's kind of part of the, when you get a new team together, is figuring out different working styles. So, you know, we had a happy hour, we kind of squashed things, figured things out, and from there on, it was actually a good environment with my seniors and, like, you know, my team. My issue at that point was with the senior manager because of the things the senior manager had been saying behind my back to people who reported to me, which I felt was demeaning and undermining me as their, you know, as their manager. So I had had some conversations with the senior manager to discuss that. So, you know, I felt like we had squashed that and everything, you know, and just was trying to have a good positive outlook for the busy season because, you know, public accounting is hard enough. But when you add in unnecessary, stupid drama, like, it's just too much, you know. Ain't nobody got time for that. Some of the last straws for me were, during busy season, you know, we kind of had this like buddy system to have two people go talk to the client so that, you know, two pairs of ears would hear what was going on. Also, it's good for training purposes, but there was one situation that occurred where literally it was going to be us to go see one person at the client. It was going to be the partner, senior manager, me, both of the seniors. So it was going to be 5 of us going because, you know, like I said, the senior manager was trying to give the certain senior more opportunities, even more than the regular senior, and more the opportunities that really should be mine as you know, as a manager. So anyways, there was gonna be 5 of us talking to one person, and I just felt like it was too much. It was a little like, it just, you know, it looked stupid in my opinion. Probably I shouldn't have done this. I should have just said, seniors, you guys stay here, we'll go. But I had a lot of other things to do. So I just said, you guys go, and I'm gonna stay back and be here with the staff and, you know, complete my review of certain things or whatever, and that was fine. So they went. Well, then the senior manager, you know, they come back from the conversation, they fill me in or whatever, and in front of everyone, the senior manager said, you really should have been in that conversation in front of everyone. And this is in a room of probably 10 people. And I said, you know, well, there was enough people going to that conversation that I felt it was overkill. Like, that probably wasn't a conversation for you to sit down on, which I agree with, but I was just so fed up with just the dumb drama and just the environment. And you know what, we gotta divide and conquer if we're gonna get anything done. So that's kind of like the view that I had. That's why I say, please give constructive criticism to people in private, and you don't have to like shame people in front of everyone. But at that point, you know, like I have said already in this video, I had worked with this person for a while, and I was starting to see a side that, you know, I did not sign up for. I'm obviously not perfect, and I'm okay with getting feedback, but don't shame me in front of other people, and don't demean me to people who report to me. I had to leave the audit room. I took my laptop. I tried to do it as as, you know, calmly as possible, but I went and sat in an empty office to get my work done because I was so pissed off and I was tired. You know, it's middle of busy season and I was like, I wanted to cry, but I didn't want to give senior manager the satisfaction of seeing me cry, and I still had to get some shit done. So I was like, I need to bring my laptop to an empty office so I can get my shit done and cry at the same time. Yeah, so that happened. See, you know, you're gonna cry at all points in your career, so don't feel bad if you're crying right now. If you're letting your personal life stress bleed into your work life, you know, I'm gonna try my hardest to be understanding of that, but I am not your punching bag. I'm not here to make you feel better by making me feel like shit. So at that point I had decided, you know what, like, this is not a working relationship that sorry, there's something in my eye, I'm not crying. I felt like it was not gonna be a good, conducive environment for me going forward, which really sucked because I struggled with this decision so much because I really liked working on the client. The transactions were exciting. Yes, it was really demanding on my time, but it was interesting, and it was, you know, it was nothing to do with the work. It had everything to do with, you know, that toxicity. At that point, it was time for the year-end reviews. I got my evaluations back. There was nothing bad in my evaluations. You know, everyone has stuff to work on, which is fine, but there was nothing that would hold me back from getting promoted to the next level, which was experienced manager. At the firm I was at, experienced manager was literally like, it's like, you know, becoming a second year staff. It just happens. You know, I was a manager for like 2 years at that point. I had been doing billing, I had been managing engagements. You know, I had not been in a senior type role, so there was really no reason for me not to get promoted to an experienced manager. And the only reason I cared about that was because you have to be an experienced manager to get to senior manager. You know what I'm saying? So like, you need that stepping stone. Based on the evaluations that I had received, I saw no reason for me not to get promoted, and neither did, like, you know, my career advisor. Roundtables go, there's nothing really bad that happened from what I was told. Promotions came out. I did not get promoted to experienced manager. And I felt like that was like the last straw for me. As much as I enjoyed most of my team, and also I don't want to paint the picture that my entire team that year was terrible. It really wasn't. It was like, I really enjoyed that team, but it definitely made a difference, and I could tell how much it was affecting me personally, on top of like how much work I was doing. But like, it was starting to get to me where, if you saw my vlogs, you saw how like I was in a really negative mindset for a good long while. And as much as I enjoyed my client, as much as I enjoyed most of the stuff at my firm, once I saw how that situation affected my growth opportunities, it was kind of a slap in the face for me. And at that point I was thinking like, you know what, I'm open to seeing what opportunities are outside of my firm, or outside of my particular group. So I started, you know, reaching out to recruiters, which is how I got this job that I'm in now. And then also I was looking at other opportunities within my firm to either transfer to like an advisory group. I started working more with the IT audit side. I would do SOC audits. So I was working towards going into a more controls focused role. I definitely wanted to take my time in finding another opportunity outside of public accounting. So I was very selective, and luckily the job that I have now was the one that I went for, and it has been such a good like just opportunity for me. All the twists and turns in your life will get you to where you need to be. So everything that I've gone through, from Big Four to going to industry to going to the mid-tier, has led me here, and so I'm very grateful for it. Yeah, so anyways, that's my story. That situation, although it was difficult, it was definitely very enlightening. I learned a lot. I grew a lot as a person, as a professional, even though I'm sad that my time was cut short, and because I likely would have still been there. You know, everything happens for a reason. If you have more questions or anything like that, I can talk more in another video because this video is so dang long. I hope it was helpful. I hope that by sharing it, you don't feel so alone in whatever situation you're going through. That's going to conclude this video. If it was entertaining, insightful, please be sure to give the video a thumbs up. I would greatly appreciate it. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing because we would love to have you as part of our subby fam. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay positive, and I'll talk to y'all in my next video. I'm sitting down to do a long-awaited video. I don't know why I'm so nervous in talking about this. Y'all wanted the tea, y'all wanted some horror stories. So anyways, yeah, I'm trying to be real comfy since, you know, this is popping open or what? Whatever. I don't know how exactly I want to go into this. Yeah, so anyways, that's a long, yeah, so okay, all right, that's one of my horror stories. I have more, so the next one I'll do is probably when giving constructive criticism went left. There was a handful of people who were like, there's laws against wage discrimination. Absolutely, I completely agree with that, but there can be an unconscious bias among a leadership group that's kind of filtering down to people below them. It's not as clear cut as saying, hey, you're a Filipino woman, I'm gonna pay you less than this white woman because you're Filipino. No, it doesn't work that way. If you are connected to the right people, you are given opportunities that others are not given, which in turn reflects well on your performance. And when there's a raise that comes around, it's typically in a range, and so that person gets more on the raise percentage. It may not even reflect their true performance. They may not even be that technically proficient, but if they're connected to the right people and they have, you know, put the right people on their team so that they don't have to do any work other than, you know, review or take credit for other people's ideas. A lot more covert, and it's not just like, hey, you know, I'm actually going to discriminate against you because you're a woman and because you know, are a person of non-white descent. Anyways, that was a long disclaimer. What'd I tell y'all? So I might add this to the end of the video because I'm sure some of you guys have already lost interest. But anyways, I just wanted to share that. I'm in like in a bad mood now because I've thought about how terrible that time was for me, but that's okay.